Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski. Today, we are in France with a UK runner who's been around the world, and apart from his own schoolboy running in the days of black and white photography, he is an author working on a book for a story about a very interesting UK athlete, South African-born Lillian Board. We'll hear about her and her very short but very successful career, a piece of history you may not know. Welcome today on the podcast, a House Harrier runner, teacher, and schoolboy runner from the UK, Bob Pateman. Hi, Shakes.
Hi, Ra. I need to correct you straight away. I'm no longer a teacher. I am now retired.
There you go. Once a teacher, always a teacher. That's what we say, even me. Let's tell people your origin story, where you grew up, and how you got involved in competitive sports as a kid.
I was brought up in a town, Crawley, which, if any of you have flown into Gatwick Airport, Crawley is the first town. We're an airport town. I was the only child, never played sport with any brothers. So when I hit school, I was always the last to be chosen for a team. But when I got to secondary school, I tried out for the cross-country team. It's a bit strange. I had watched the marathon in the 1964 Olympics, and I just decided I was going to do that. And 4 years later, I got to secondary school, and there was a very strong cross-country team in the school. And I went out, and if I had collapsed after 800 meters panting, it would have surprised me to pieces. I never run, but I just presumed I could. And sure enough, I got into a very strong school team, and from there into the Sussex schoolboys team.
What did you know about anything apart from watching the Olympics? And let's test your memory. Who won the 1964 Olympic marathon?
I would have been Abby Baliki, of course, second
Bakila,
win.
yeah.
Wearing shoes on that occasion.
What was the running scene like in your secondary school with Sussex then, in terms of equipment, in terms of the types of places you ran? British cross country is a little bit different than other countries.
Yeah. After about 2 years of schoolboy athletics, I joined the local athletic club, Crawley Athletic Club. It was a good time. 68, 69, club athletics was so strong in Britain. And we had just started a national track and field club competition. So for those of us who weren't going to make international and even county level, it gave us a target. And every week we would go off somewhere competing. It was a very strong subculture. The results never made the national newspapers. They would make the local newspapers. And one of the exciting things as a 15-year-old was opening the local newspaper and seeing my picture in it.
What was the coaching plan? How many coaches for the club? And what was the span of age, and how did they group you?
Yeah. Crawley in the 60s was unbelievably disorganized. We had an incredible coach, a man called Tom Linton, ex-boxer, ex-musician. He shaped most of our lives. And I know I became a better person. Having said that, had I joined another athletic club, I would probably have become a better runner. Tom saw athletics as a way of shaping people's lives. Had I joined the other local club, I think I would have had a much more successful career. I wouldn't have had such a good social life. I wouldn't maybe have become a hasher. So to me, Crawley Athletic Club for 5 years was my whole life. I'll tell you a couple of stories here. I ran in the Sussex schoolboys team. One of the members in our team was Olympic athlete Steve Ovett. He was 2 years younger than me, so his future, we knew he was good from the first time you saw him. And I do actually get a mention in Steve's autobiography. He says that in 1970, 1969, the English cross-country championships were held in Blackburn. It was wet and rainy. I had the worst day of my life. And then that evening, some idiot suggested we all go to Blackpool for the evening. That was me. A second Steve Ovett, I took my first wife out for a date, and I was quite naive. I took her to a track and field international at the Crystal Palace. And I think it was shaping up to be our first and last date, which, fair enough, is a cold evening at the Crystal Palace. And Steve Ovett is running around with a couple of Kenyans warming up. And the stadium is empty. No one else has come to this match. And he looks up and he sees me and he shouts and he comes running up and sits with us. I think it's the only reason I got a second date with my first wife.
Wow. Let's talk about these courses. How were they maintained? How far afield did you go from Sussex, and how did you travel there? How big was the traveling group?
Whether it's cross country or track, generally the club would hire a coach every Saturday, and we would go out. Normally, Crawley is like halfway between the coast and London. We would seldom travel more than, say, 50 miles. When the competition started, these kind of mosaic of friendly matches turned into a league. That would change. And at least once a year, we would go out, say, as far as Cornwall, which meant like getting on the coach at about 4 o'clock in the morning. I remember going to Steve and saying, oh, we're off to Cornwall, we're leaving at 5. And he ran for Brighton, who were in the National League. He was saying, we're going to Liverpool, we're flying the day before. It was, yeah, it became more competitive and probably less fun. An interesting observation. We were a very strong team at our level, but most of our runners did athletics as a second sport. They wouldn't turn up until after the football season or the rugby season was over, and they would disappear when the football and rugby seasons started. And we were all set for promotion to the top level of the Southern League, which would have been very good for our club. And all our rugby players and football players disappeared. And Tom, who was this incredibly strong character, had blazing arguments with them. One more game, you can, but it meant a lot of our athletes actually left when competitive athletics started.
Let's talk about what you were running in terms of shoes and the surfaces of these cross-country meets and the tracks then, while you were there, late 60s, early 70s. Was there anything changing, or was it still cinders and dirt?
No, it was a period of change. I'll put a date to this. In England, we built the first full 400-meter tartan track in 1968 in preparation for the Olympics. And I probably ran on it in 68 or 69. And the first thing that shocked us all, we had to go and buy different spikes because tartan is very different. And it was cleverly designed. The tartan spikes, you just bought the set and they fitted into your ordinary spikes. But running shoes were already quite good. 68 was quite a revolution for running spikes and running shoes. I think the big changes had occurred before then. Tartan came in, but you remember in Britain, we were imperial distances. With Crystal Palace opened, they opened it as a 400-meter track. If you look up the records for the British Championships in 68, the women ran at Crystal Palace, meters. The men stayed at the White City, still running yards. Then over the next 2 years, every track in England had a little bit shaved off the corner, and they all became meter tracks. So that was a major issue. The other thing that changed with competitive events, clubs had to suddenly find pole vaulters, hammer throwers, these unglamorous events. And again, we had a blazing row down at the council track because our pole vaulters were jumping into really dangerous high jump pits. And we had a whole brand new pole vault equipment, which the council had bought, and they wouldn't bring it out in case it got vandalized in the night. So, that did change British athletics. Suddenly, every club had to cater. Also, there were several clubs. I'm actually writing about one now, Shaftesbury Harriers, which are famous for Dave Bedford being a member. They were a cross-country club. They decided to enter the Southern League Division 5, and you and I now could probably win Division 5, just the two of us. It was a low standard. And they went from there to champions of Britain in about 8 years. For various reasons, but driven by the motivation of competition.
as you were starting out there, still in school, what was the press and attention given to people like Bedford and Ovett there as they were coming up? Was there a recognition of their potential?
Yeah, it's actually a very interesting question. The quality papers, particularly the Times, would have an athletic correspondent who on Sunday and Monday would put a summary of the week. Now, obviously, when the Olympics or the Europeans came around, quite good coverage, to be honest. But they would probably have one correspondent who would deal with one event, maybe two over the weekend. The great one was Cliff Temple, wonderful man, incredibly funny writer, who sadly committed suicide. He was accused, we all believe unjustly, of molesting some of the young female athletes he was training because he was exposing corruption in the high level of British athletics. And he actually walked along a railway track and walked into a train. For me, he was one of my heroes. I would write to him as a 15-year-old athlete who was thinking that I'm not going to make the Olympics, maybe I'll make the journalist. But yeah, I respected Cliff. So the quality papers would do that. For all of us, though, the thing was a little magazine. I have one on my table. There's a coincidence. Here it is, Athletic Weekly.
Uh-huh.
And we would subscribe to this. You couldn't buy it from the counter. You had to subscribe. And you'd go down Friday, and there would be a little magazine, beautifully written, with every possible result of every possible meeting. So that's how athletes kept in. Now, the man who changed this was David Bedford. The charisma of that guy. So we're looking now 71 onwards. He just brought people. I went to the 1972 British Championships where they were going to select the athletic team. And for the first time ever, you needed to buy tickets in advance. You couldn't just buy them at the stadium. I remember some of my club mates turning up with a look of shock on their face because the Crystal Palace was always half empty, even for a big man. It was so amateurish. I went down to the midweek England v East Germany game. I put on my Crawley AC tracksuit and I watched it from inside the track.
Yeah, that reminds me going to the Pennsylvania State High School Championship the second year after I graduated. I turned up. Yeah, I just walked down on the track, wore a hat, and helped adjust the hurdles. I wasn't a certified official at that point or anything, but yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Let's divert back. It's great history, and these stories are fantastic. But I want to set your personal background for people in terms of your experience there about the training. How much mileage and what kind of training were you doing from the start to the end of school?
When I ran for Sussex Schoolboys, I was not training at all. I would literally just go out for the races. Once I joined the athletic club, then I would first of all just do club nights, which during the winter we'd train in a gym. It was quite interesting, actually. We'd do a pretty ordinary keep fit kind of session with Tom just taking 50 kids in the gym. But we would always finish with a game of basketball. Now, nobody in England played basketball. We just didn't do it. So by the time I got to college, I'm only 5'6", but I captained the B team basketball. No one else had played. And if I'd been 6 foot, I think I would have played for England in those days. I was quite a good basketball player. Then in the summer, it got a bit wild. And we basically just went down the track and did our own thing. And I'm quite proud of this. By the time I was 17, 18, I realized I was not going to run for England. I realized that. One thing that showed me is I'd met Steve Ovett, and my God, you see the difference. I've never seen a runner so talented. But I was then doing everything else. I was the press officer for the club. Tom, who I say was running the club like Donald Trump's trying to run America at the moment, with a nicer personality. Sorry, I don't know what your politics are.
There's all kind of politics. Listen to this podcast, so let's just leave it there. Yeah.
Tom had a family tragedy. His wife died, and he dropped out. And at 17, I stepped up and I won a very nice piece of plate glass that year as the official of the year. I'd basically run the club for 7 months, and I was 17. One of the things I did, which Tom never did, was try to put a coaching plan in. It didn't work. I didn't have time to see it through because I then went off to college and I left the club. But now you go down there and you go onto the club website and there's 6 pages of care, safety. And in those days, God, it was how we didn't have accidents down there. I don't know.
What was your personal evolution of the importance and your personal self-assessment of competition? How did you handle that? Coming from this background, not training, turning up with races, saying, I'm good at this, but how did you face competition and how did that affect your self-image over time?
By the time I was running for Crawley, I was training. And I was doing my own training. I made a real mess of it the first year, and I just went backwards in everything. And I'm quite a determined person even then. And I sat down one day and decided either I give up or I do it properly. I worked out my own training schedule, and I dropped out of most of the club nights. I would go down to the track on the nights the club was not training. I had a couple of very good seasons. Again, if I knew what I knew now, yeah, we all say that. If you don't get nervous for competition, anyone who's not run track and field, I played other team sports, soccer, hockey. You don't get the same level of nerves because you're not out there on your own. Those nerves never go away. I was 50 years old. I ran in a fun run at Kuwait, but it was like a race. It was a race and the prizes were damn good. It was sponsored by the Hilton, brunch for 3. And I was still the same level of nerves.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a problem for me. I've known people who give up because of the nerves.
Let's talk about the big races, the nationals for schoolboys. What was the environment like? You mentioned Crystal Palace being half empty in the early days. What was it like in terms of the crowd, in terms of course marshalling or anything? What was it like to run then?
It was pretty well organized. Now, the big events in England were the English schools championships, where you ran for it was like to run in the English schools. You had to, first of all, represent your school. Then you go to an area championship within your county. Then you go to the county championships. And even winning the county championship wasn't a guarantee of selection. You still had to do a qualifying time. You had to be pretty good to even get there. The English schools is an incredible competition. I've worked it out for the book I'm writing. I think the Olympics have about 32 events spread over 9 days. The English schools have about 25 events for each of 6 age groups spread over 3 days.
Wow.
They start on Friday. It's an amazing event. You've got every promising athlete in England. And some of the people who have competed there, Joe Bugner, world heavyweight boxing contestant, threw the discus. Gareth Edwards, the other great rugby player, ran the hurdles. You go through the list. Who's the author? A few good, I can't remember his name. The writer who got into trouble, MP, ended up in prison. Anyway, he also ran the English schools. There's a whole list of who's been to the English schools, some of who didn't become athletes.
While we're talking about this history that you got in there watching the Olympics, Roger Bannister, was he a figure in these things? Was he part of these things? Did he show up?
Yes and no. By the time then, Roger Bannister, I'm trying to work out how old he would have been. He would have been a very distinguished surgeon. I never met him. I never saw him at an event. But I did run on that Iffy Road track where he broke the 4 minutes. And even then, wow, there was a wow factor that this is where it happened. One of the interesting things, the same week that Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile, a woman called Diana Leatherhead became the first woman to break the 5-minute mile.
Yeah.
Ask any sport fan and they won't know.
Yeah, that's great. I want to ask a little bit about your transition out then. You came to a realization that my career is not going to take me on to the Olympics or the national team. So you adjust and you went off to college. How did you handle that
Well,
realization?
it was not a problem. Subconsciously, looking back on it, if I had not gone to college, if I'd not been accepted, I would have stayed in Crawley and I would have gone into team management and coaching. And now I'd be getting a gold watch from the athletic club and maybe an MBE from the Queen for my services. I think I would have made my life in athletics. I was a very good team manager. I was 18 and I took our under 16 team to the national finals, real way above our ability. But for various reasons, I did scrape into college. There's another story here. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was not going to become an athlete. I was going to spend my whole life with Crawley and Sussex Athletics, team manager, and so on. I was no idea what I wanted to do for work. So I was working with my father. We were repairing a roof. And I saw a young teacher down below teaching primary kids rugby. And I thought, I'd like to do that. So I went down to the athletic club social pub that we use, said, I think I'm going to become a teacher. And one athlete said, oh, my brother over there is in teachers college. Come on, let's go and talk to him. The next week he brought me the form, helped me fill it in, took it down for me. I didn't know what I was doing. I got an interview. Now, I had the worst spelling in the world. I had very average academics. Every other kid in the interview had 2 or 3 county school sports to their credit, and I had a bit of running. What happened was the guy in front of me for interview was Mike Grattan, the last British guy to win the London Marathon. The librarian at college was the 10th ranked Scottish marathon runner. And the 2 tutors realized they needed only 1 more for the team. So if Mike Grattan had said no, they would have not taken me. They would have taken a rugby player. But Mike accepted. So they took me, thinking I'd drop out of Christmas after the cross-country season. But no, we kept going.
What was it about you at that point in life that made you a successful manager?
I knew the sport inside out. I was really good at going up to younger kids and saying, you should try the hurdles. Or, I like that. One thing that Tom never did, which I didn't know, when we got a competitive youth team, I'd go over to the mass of like 20 young kids who weren't really just training as a mass, and I'd have a look at them and say, I need that kid for my relay team. I knew the sport. I had an eye. And I think, even though I didn't realize it at the time, because of that, I was a very shy, insecure person, but I was getting respect at the athletic club, which I hadn't realized until looking back on it.
What happened with you getting a teaching degree, and then what happened with your life and running?
Yeah, when I was at college, I worked with Mike. We had an athletic club. We would stage a Bognor Relay Challenge. So the town where we lived, we had a little course that we often used to run, about 3 kilometers, I think. And traditionally, our college staged a very small 12 to 20 team event. The interesting thing was the course record was held by Sussex University. And their team had included Brendan Foster, who became European 5,000 meter champion, David Bedford, who became world record holder, a guy called Chris France, who was a very good steeplechaser. No one knows who the 4th one was, but he must have been pretty useless. And we broke their record.
And was it 4 times 3K?
No, it was start with 1 lap, 3. Then 2 guys would do 2 laps, 6 or 5. And then the last one would do 1 lap. And I always say it's one of my happier moments. I did the time we broke the record. I was running against a guy called Chris Carter, a real hero of mine. He'd been one of my coaches on county courses, European record holder over 800 meters. And I was running against him. And they were all saying, keep as close as you can to him, Bob. Keep as close as you can to him. And I thought, he's a bit older than I am. I know this course backwards. And I was on a PE course. I was incredibly fit. I finished about 100 meters in front of Chris Carter, which was like, yeah. So the college athletics was very low key. I left Crawley Athletic Club and I joined Bognor. Bognor is a tiny little athletic club, But my goodness, that year we put a team together and we came very close to winning the second division of the Southern League. The Bognor no longer runs. Club athletics in Britain has fallen apart.
Really? When did that happen? Over what time?
Yeah, I don't know. It crept up on me because I wasn't in England to see it. But I look now, my club Crawley competes in the second level of the National League. Our team in the Southern League 15 years ago would have beaten them. Club athletics is fallen apart. It's still grassroots. It still gets people into the sport. But the competition side is nowhere near as exciting. The only exception is the National Cross Country Championship. What a race. 1,000 people, you have everybody. You have marathon runners, steeplechasers, ultra marathon runners, 1,500-meter runners. Everybody is out for the national. You look down the list when it's published in Athletic Weekly the week after, and there's a Ray Smedley who was an Olympic semi-final 1,500-meter runner coming 49th. And you go, that was good for Ray.
Wow, nice. What about barriers on these courses where you're running up through that time frame? Were you running on cross-country courses that had jumps, puddles, anything? What were they like?
No, it had changed. Something I didn't realize at the time. Sorry, Ray. I'll tell you, Ray, I'm going to fill my glass up again. This is a really pleasant Sunday. The sun is out. I'm retired. I'm not hashing very much at the moment. I did the Surrey 50th a couple of weeks ago, but I'm back in London at the weekend. So I might persuade Nippy that we can do a hash. Sorry, cross country. I didn't realize, but traditionally, English cross country is not considered cross country unless there's a stretch of plowed field. And I've only ever run through plow once. Oh my goodness. I've never. The courses were already becoming tamer. You no longer were expected to jump over fences. The plow section was no longer there. They were still tough. There were 9 miles, 10 miles, and it was cross country. Yeah, so it was taming down. Not perhaps as tame as I understand the World Cross Country Championship, which is virtually a grass track with a few loops. So you can still get tough courses, and you certainly expected some tough hills. I've been on tougher hashes, but then again, on a hash, you're vertical.
Let's talk about your travels then and what you did as a casual runner over time and your move into writing and your interest in Lillian Board.
Once I got overseas, not so much in my first post in Dar es Salaam, but certainly by the time I got to Jakarta, I was then about 40. But there was a very fun running, competitive culture. There'd be a race for the expats, like once a month. And I would always do those. And I would expect to win. I didn't always, but I would certainly expect to be first or second. So I got a little bit competitive again at a lower level. And I met Nippy and we came to Sweden in 2002. In Sweden, obviously there's races every week, but there's 5 events that the town turns out for. Stockholm Marathon, half marathon, the night run, the snow mile. And the hash would always enter a team for those. And Nippy, Natalie, who's a very good runner, she would generally be the first in the women's race who was not with a serious club. She would beat all the fun runners. She would finish about 13th. And I would do the same in my age group. For people not taking it seriously, we were both still very good runners.
And at this point, you were full-time teaching all these years.
Oh, yeah, more or less. When I was in Stockholm, I retired for the first time. So I was only supply teaching. So I did 2 things. I did my master's degree and I trained for the Stockholm Marathon. So I ran the Stockholm Marathon. I did 3 hours 33 on my 50th birthday. So I was quite proud of that.
Yeah, I happened to be there just for the day 1 year around 2007 and handed out drinks at mile 22, handed out beers. I just happened to be there with a non-hashing friend and we were there and I did an impromptu beer table in the Stockholm Marathon there.
Oh, brilliant. No, Stockholm in those days was unbelievable. I've just come across an old scrapbook. We entered a team for the snow mile. It's like the smallest of the mass events. We had two runners who were sponsored by clubs, like they got free entry because they were classed as elite. Had they been running for the hash, we would have come second in the team competition. We were incredible. We had maybe 7 capable of under 3 hours, and quite 4 or 5 capable of under 2:30. Very talented group.
What about your involvement with kids, coaching, mentoring, that stuff that you had done early in life as a team manager? Did you find an outlet for that while you were a teacher?
Not very much. I've done a fair bit of coaching, but by the time I got to college, I was playing more team sports. I've only ever once really trained a team. I trained at my school in Oman, a Muscat team. We moved conferences. So we became more competitive in more sports, and we had to find a cross-country team. So I trained a cross-country team for the Southeast Asian Championships or whatever. And we went to India and we did okay. Yeah, I was quite proud of them. I've never really gone into coaching. It'll be one of my regrets in life.
When did you start writing? You're a prolific writer. You've done a lot of work with House Harrier history, with a lot of your own personal writing, and you've got this project about Lillian Board. When did that take in that it became something you did? How's the discipline for that compared to the discipline of runner training?
It's interesting. The writing predates the running. It's been something that's in my soul from day one. And ironically, my first motivation was to make lots of money so I could retire and spend my time running. But I think the turning point, I was in college. I was doing lots of writing for the college, particularly in the local newspaper. I got the reputation that if you want an article in the Bognor Times, go and see Bob, he'll write it for you. And I went down to the Bognor newspaper. I'd already been press officer of Crawley. So I introduced myself and I took one look at this guy and I thought, you haven't left your desk for 7 years. You're going to publish everything I send you. He was a poor guy, lazy. He'd come to the end of his career. All he wanted was copy on his desk. So I was writing for the newspaper about everything in college. And I started doing some articles. And there was 1 week I did get 3 articles accepted by national magazines, low-key magazines. And that's the point where I think when you're published nationally, you say, okay, now I'm a writer. It's hard work. You've talked about the Lillian project. A bit of bad news there. I did find an agent who wanted to represent me, but he's been unable to find a publisher. So that's back on the back burner. I'll relaunch that in 1968 when we get to the anniversary of the Olympics. It happens. The writing has been so rewarding. The last 2 jobs I've had have been because I'm a writer. The headmaster wanted a teacher to inspire writing in the school. I probably made more money because I was a writer.
Yeah, interesting. Let's give everybody a blurb. If certainly people not from the UK won't be as familiar with Lillian Board's story because it was a tragically early ended career. What's a blurb about Lillian Board and why she drew your interest?
Yeah, absolutely. Lillian was about 3 years older than I am, 4 years older. She took British athletics by storm. In 1967, she went to Los Angeles running for, was it a Commonwealth or a European team? I believe a Commonwealth team. And she was the slowest woman in the race. She won the race. Now, it was the first athletic competition, I believe, televised live in Britain from America.
Huh.
So after winning this race, totally against the odds, she was still only 17. She rang her parents to say I won and couldn't believe they'd actually watched it. She then instantly became what we called a Golden Girl. Now, to me, the Golden Girl title is a little bit racialist. It meant 2 things. It meant a gold medal potentialist, but it also meant pretty blonde hair. We never gave a title to the next generation of female athletes. So I'm uncomfortable with the title, but she was the Golden Girl. So she went to the Mexico Olympics as a favorite. and she lost the race in the last 2 or 3 strides. Years later, a couple of years ago, I sat in the stadium. I've been in Mexico, and it was an empty stadium, and I'm sitting there, and I've seen the tape so many times. I could watch the race almost like in real time in my mind. Because I was aiming to write a biography, and I still am, the fact that we don't have a publisher yet is only a delay. I also looked into the life of her biggest rival, the French woman who beat her.
For people that really aren't familiar, this is the 400 meters.
400 meters, 1968 Olympics, and the duel between the two women carried on to 1969, which was the European Championships. And some of these races exist on YouTube. Really incredible personalities, incredible women. Colette Besson is an unbelievable character. So we had this two incredible women with this incredible rivalry. And then in 1970, Lillian comes out. She's now European champion, Olympic silver medalist. The Commonwealth Games are coming up. Two things happen. The first of the non-blonde superstars, a woman called Marilyn Nerfield, who's British Jamaican. She's British at the time. She comes out and she's 18, the most talented athlete I've ever seen. And she is clearly better than Lillian at 400. Lillian is moving up to 800 and 1500. Marilyn never had Lillian's social skills. She never had a relationship with the press. There was so much racialism in sport in the 70s. It's not widely publicized, but there was the Commonwealth Games, 1970 in Edinburgh, which was supposed to be the friendly games. There was almost a physical fight in the dining room when the British throwers, who were, yeah, they were all, maybe one wasn't, but they were all on testosterone prompting drugs, told the Jamaican team to quieten down. The friendly games, mixed cultures. Anyway, Marilyn went off to run for Jamaica after that. I last saw Lillian run, and I was at the Crystal Palace. She ran in the women's championships that summer, and she looked awful. There were rumors that she was unwell, but it was thought to be just a stomach problem. She had cancer. And her third place in the British Championships in July, when she was dead by December, was probably the bravest run you'd ever seen. So yes, he died of cancer on Boxing Day, 1970 or 71. Yeah. No, 1970. No, 1970, yeah.
I encourage everybody to look up Lillian Borden, at least on Wikipedia, and what other races they can watch to find. As you described, an interesting story. It'd be great if you can find somebody with some interest. Maybe we have some other people who are authors on here. Maybe they can speak with their publishers and see if there's some interest there. It sounds like a great story.
There's a Lillian Borden memorial page on Facebook, and I put some excerpts from my book there. You'll see lots of photographs and stories there.
Great. What do you think then? It's interesting, your insights into the history of the changing world in terms of racial issues and the change that had happened with the facilities in British track and the awareness. What about the changes in the sports? As you said, testosterone fueled weightlifters, pretty common, but what about the other changes in the sports view as an observer now, as an informed observer? Yeah. What do you think about what phases have we gone through and where are we now?
The thing I think we're losing on, it sounds a little thing, but I think it's quite important, is the heraldry of the big TV events, which is what's going to bring kids into the sport. Everyone now is wearing either a Nike or they're all running the same colors. And in the old days, you could tell the athletes apart by the colors. They'd be wearing their club or their country vest. And I hate this, everyone wearing a sponsored, vest from one club. We need to make the sport individual. We need story. That's why Dave Bedford was so great. He was a character. People knew him. They knew what he was going to do. So that's one tiny thing I would change. I think there's a mystery here. The Swedish 1500 meter record was set by a steeplechaser. He's probably the best ever runner, but he set the 1500 meter record for Sweden in about, 1980. It's only just been beaten. The British 1500 meter record was beaten about 5 years ago. Why are we not producing? The fact is, if Coe and Ovett were running today, their times would still win them medals in the European Championships. Their times would still get them into Olympic finals. We talk about high altitude Kenyans, Ethiopians, but the fact is, the generation when I was there, they were running incredible times. Now, we know in the sprints and the throws and most events, and particularly on the women's side, which if we have time, we can talk about, there were drugs. There were drugs everywhere. I would go down to Crystal Palace and train. My best mate was the British discus record holder. We'd go up in the canteen. You'd be there and you'd see some thrower suddenly run out of the room and spew up, or you'll see some sprinter's eyes were now yellow. It was no secret who was on drugs. Yet there was never, ever a rumor that any middle distance runner took drugs. Yet there is this gap of 30 years where Western runners have not been as fast, and I cannot explain it.
There's quite a bit of interest now. It's interesting. I was a miler in school, and the Australian kid who's gone under 4 minutes at age 15, and the American success at middle distance has certainly put it. Let me ask you then one thing. Did you watch any of the Michael Johnson first meet, the Grand Slam meet? And this is a setting where they'll invite runners. You run 2 races in 3 days. You might run the 100 hurdles and the 110 hurdles and the 100 meters, or the 800 and the 1500. You get points, $100,000 in 3 days for the most success. Did you see any of it?
No, I haven't. I did read about it. I think it's interesting. We started this, a professional circuit, in about 1981. A lot of retired Olympians came together and tried a tour, and it was of no interest. The same people racing against each other week after week for no apparent purpose except to make money. No, I must admit, I've not taken an interest in it.
Yeah. The part of the stated goal is to put it in front of the public and get more interest. But personally, I was a little disappointed in the showing of it, in the announcing of it. They had some quality announcers and some names, but it just wasn't presented with enough, as you say, heraldry and excitement compared to an Olympics. And that's what's going to happen if they're going to have interest more than every 2 or 4 years.
Yeah, athletics is a strange sport to watch. To me, as someone who's really into the sport, or was into the sport, a club match where you're watching and you're thinking, well, they're 5 points ahead, but they're weak in the pole. That's the fun of it. To sit in the Crystal Palace in an empty stadium and watch your club compete in the National Cup final, and knowing, you say, I've raced against him. It's sport to enjoy. You need knowledge. And I don't know if that exists to the general public in athletics. We have characters. We have Bolt, we have Bedford. But to watch a race and realize the person in 7th over 3,000 meters is a potential Olympic marathon runner, you think, my God, I didn't know he had that speed. It's a funny kind of sport. I think only people who are really in, which I'm not anymore. I don't have that knowledge anymore. When I was in the sport and we would sit at the Crystal Palace, I drove back one day. I was the designated driver. And in my car, I had Richard Slaney, the British discus champion and the second strongest man in the world. I had Bruce Longdon, who coached Daley Thompson. It was being in the sport that counts.
You've had an interesting spot in the sport in that great time frame, and you have this interesting outlook on the history of British athletics and running. And I haven't gotten enough people from around the world on this particular podcast series yet. I've had a few, but hashers will probably be interested in saying, who is this guy that I know from the House Harriers in this background? Because we don't always get enough time to hear some of this background stuff. So it's been good time. You went for a run today?
Yeah, I've had a few problems. I've had a hip replacement. And for about 18 months before the hip replacement, I couldn't run. So I went 2 years without running. I've got a video of me running 50 meters down my hallway in Mexico, outdoor hallway. And that was the most enjoyable run I've ever done. I was 5 days out of surgery and I ran this 50 meters. So I got to running in Mexico, but it's high altitude. It never felt comfortable. So now, yeah, I'm here in France. It's beautiful countryside. And running is actually becoming fun again, which I'm really delighted for. That is a really pleasant surprise. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know how far I'll take it. I can't run too much on my hips, so I'm not doing 100 miles a week again. But yeah, I'll be running every day, I think, now.
That's great. That's a good bookend to the story. It's good to hear things are going well that way. Good luck with the Lillian board. Like I said, there will be some people here that now we'll certainly invite them. If anybody does say they have a publisher who's interested, we'll get them in touch.
That'd be brilliant. Thank you, Ra.
Thanks for your time today, Bob. It's hard to, it's weird to call you Bob. We all on the hash have nicknames, so it's Shakespeare to me from your writing. But thanks for your time today and enjoy the rest of the wine there and have a good afternoon.
Yeah, no, and to you, Ra. You're always very welcome.
Sure. Thanks.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed another episode. Do you have someone you'd like to hear interviewed on the podcast? You can leave a comment on the YouTube channel or on the website, running70s.com. That's running70s.com. Let me know what you think of the episodes and anyone, including yourself, you'd like to hear interviewed. I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.